What if I told you that the most glamorous entrance Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have made in recent memory didn't end with applause, adoration, or flashing smiles, but with boos that cut through the night like knives, heckles that echoed louder than the music itself, and an exit so abrupt it left the entire venue gasping? That's not just rumor. It's the heart of what unfolded at the One805 Live Concert, a charity event meant to be a showcase of unity, hope, and Hollywood sparkle. Instead, it turned into a public humiliation that is already being called one of the most embarrassing moments of their post-royal lives. Can you imagine it? Meghan, once adored as a modern Cinderella figure, walking into a glittering event with cameras ready to capture her triumph, only to be met with raw rejection, boos, jeers, and hackles that sliced right through the carefully crafted smiles. Do you think she saw it coming? Or did Harry, by her side, whisper reassurances that would soon collapse under the weight of reality? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. That is where our story begins. Because this isn't just about a concert. This isn't just about a bad night. This is about everything Meghan and Harry have built, their fragile brand, their Hollywood dreams, their desperate bid to carve an identity away from the palace, colliding with a public that has had enough. And the sound of that rejection wasn't polite silence. It was vicious, loud, relentless. Now let's step into the scene together. The One805 Live Concert, an event designed to bring people together in support of first responders, should have been the perfect backdrop for Meghan and Harry's redemption. A chance to remind the world that they're not just former royals. They're philanthropists, global icons, and champions of worthy causes. Meghan had carefully selected her outfit, striking that delicate balance between Hollywood glam and approachable warmth. Harry had rehearsed his easy smile, the one meant to hide his nervous energy. They entered the grounds expecting to reclaim a little bit of their lost shine. But what happens when the illusion shatters in real time? In the first seconds of their arrival, all seemed ordinary. A few cheers, a few claps, cameras flashing. But then, like an unexpected thunderclap, the atmosphere shifted. A ripple moved across the crowd. It wasn't awe. It wasn't reverence. It was something darker. Voices rising, sharp and unfiltered. Boos, jeers, and words too cruel for the carefully managed world Meghan and Harry have tried to live in. Have you ever seen someone try to maintain composure while the ground crumbles beneath them? Meghan's smile stiffened. Her hand clutched Harry's arm tighter. Harry's jaw tightened in that familiar way, the same way it did during his infamous TV interviews when pressed with uncomfortable questions. The cameras, always eager for drama, captured every flicker of discomfort, every second of tension. Why does this matter? Because the stage was not just physical, it was symbolic. This was not a palace balcony. This was not a curated Netflix documentary. This was live, unedited, uncontrolled, and the public, given its first unfiltered chance, didn't play along. Now, pause for a moment. Think back to Meghan's first appearances as Harry's partner. Remember the glow, the fascination, the media frenzy that painted her as the breath of fresh air the monarchy desperately needed? How far we've come. How brutal the contrast. That night at One805 Live wasn't just a stumble. It was a loud reminder that the same public who once lifted her up can now tear her down. And here's the twist. This wasn't in London. This wasn't in Windsor. This wasn't the British tabloids flexing their power. This was California, Meghan's own turf, her homecoming of sorts. Yet the rejection was loudest here. Isn't that telling? It makes you wonder, what exactly triggered the boos? Was it resentment at their constant public lecturing while living in a Montecito mansion? Was it frustration with their constant victimhood narrative, spilling family secrets for profit? Or was it simply that, in a space filled with genuine heroes, firefighters, first responders, local supporters, the self-styled royals appeared out of touch, irrelevant, and uninvited? These are not questions with easy answers. But one thing is clear. The walkout that followed wasn't just about hurt feelings. It was about optics, about control slipping, about the brand they built cracking under the weight of public opinion. And isn't it ironic? The couple who fought for freedom, who broke away from the constraints of the monarchy to live life on their own terms, found themselves prisoners of a different kind, prisoners of perception. Because perception is everything. And perception turned against them in an instant. Let me paint the moment for you. Meghan, in her carefully curated ensemble, begins to walk faster. Harry, trying to shield her, places a hand on her back. The jeers don't die down. If anything, they grow louder. The audience, sensing vulnerability, leans in. Some shout mocking questions. Others laugh. And in that laughter lies the cruelest cut of all. Meghan doesn't just hear the boos. She feels the loss of control, the humiliation of a crowd turning into an opponent she can't silence. Ask yourself, what must have been going through her mind? Was she thinking of her royal critics, gleefully imagining her downfall? Was she thinking of the palace aides who once told her popularity is fleeting? Was she regretting every headline, every interview, every bridge burned? Or was she simply thinking, get me out of here? Because she did. She walked out, quickly, abruptly, leaving behind an audience buzzing with disbelief, leaving behind a narrative that can never again be fully controlled. And here's the part you need to understand. This isn't an isolated humiliation. This isn't just a bad night at a concert. This is part of a larger story, a story of a couple at war with their own image, a couple desperate to be adored, yet constantly fueling the very backlash they fear. Think of it like a mirror shattering. Every crack reflects a different failure. The boos at the Jubilee, the ridicule after the Netflix docuseries, the collapse of the Spotify deal, and now, the jeers at 1805 Live. Each piece sharp, cutting deeper into the brand once designed to be untouchable. So here we are. Meghan Markle, walking out into the California night, trailed by her husband, her dream of a Hollywood fairy tale slipping further away. The cameras caught it. The crowd lived it. And now the world knows it. But what came next? The whispers backstage, the reactions from celebrities, the stunned silence of the organizers, would push this humiliation into an entirely different category. And no one, not even Meghan herself, saw it coming. It was supposed to be dazzling. A night of glamour, music, and high-profile appearances, where every guest could bask in the glow of Hollywood charm while supporting a noble cause. The 1805 Live Concert had been marketed as an unforgettable evening, a blend of celebrity, charity, and entertainment that would capture headlines for all the right reasons. And on paper, it had everything. Big-name performers, wealthy patrons, a picturesque California backdrop, and of course, the added spectacle of having Prince Harry and Meghan Markle among the star-studded attendees. But here's the twist. Instead of being remembered as a triumphant return to the spotlight, that night will forever be etched in memory for what went wrong. Have you ever seen someone step onto a stage expecting applause, only to be met with rejection? That's exactly what happened. As Meghan and Harry arrived at the venue, the expectation was clear. They were going to be the headline draw. The press was there, cameras ready, lenses zoomed in. Meghan's smile was bright, Harry's wave rehearsed. For a fleeting second, it almost looked like old times, like the golden couple who once commanded international adoration had stepped back into the light. But then came the shift, the sound, the unmistakable, unforgiving roar of disapproval. It wasn't a whisper, not a handful of discontented voices. It was loud enough to dominate the atmosphere. The kind of sound that no PR team, no carefully managed smile, no Hollywood gloss could drown out. Let's step back for a second. Why this concert? Why here? 1805 Live wasn't just any event. It was designed to celebrate and support first responders, the men and women who put their lives on the line for their communities. Firefighters, paramedics, police officers, heroes whose reputations are built not on titles or privilege, but on sacrifice and service. Meghan and Harry's attendance was meant to signal alignment with that kind of nobility, to suggest that they, too, were champions of community and compassion. But doesn't that create an uncomfortable contrast? On one side, you have men and women who risk everything for strangers. On the other, a couple accused of monetizing their grievances, living in luxury while claiming victimhood. Was the crowd really seeing two aligned figures? Or were they seeing the very opposite of the values being celebrated that night? That's the first fracture. The setup that should have elevated them instead highlighted their flaws. The crowd knew it. They felt it. And in that moment, their reaction wasn't polite. It wasn't controlled. It was raw. They booed. Now, picture Meghan in that moment. She walks forward, hand in hand with Harry. The cameras flash. The heels click against the pavement. And then, like a cruel betrayal, the sound erupts. Boos cascading, jeers slicing through the night. Someone shouts, others laugh. The glamour dissolves. What do you do when the very people you expect to adore you spit rejection in your face? Harry, ever the protective husband, tried to mask the situation. His wave stiffened. His grin tightened. But body language is everything. The camera captured the clenched jaw, the subtle tensing of his shoulders. Meghan's hand gripped his arm with just enough force to betray her panic. And then, the whisper, something between them. Words the microphones couldn't catch, but the world could sense. Do you think it was reassurance? Or do you think it was fear? Because fear hung heavy in the air. The irony is brutal. This wasn't Britain. This wasn't the monarchy's territory. This was Meghan's homeland, the place where she was supposed to shine free from the suffocating traditions of Buckingham Palace. Yet here, too, the rejection was louder than applause. The symbolism couldn't be sharper. Even in California, the land where she sought reinvention, the public was ready to heckle her into silence. And here's what makes the moment sting even deeper. The organizers had counted on Meghan and Harry's presence to elevate the event. Their names had been whispered in promotions, their attendance designed to bring star power. Yet the very sight of them fractured the audience's mood. The boos weren't just a sound, they were a message. A declaration that no matter how much the Sussexes try to reinvent themselves, they cannot outrun public discontent. Let's pause here. Think about the last time Meghan and Harry faced such blatant rejection. Was it the Platinum Jubilee? The Queen's funeral, where they were kept at arm's length? Those moments stung, but they came on British soil, where the royal family's influence looms large. This was different. This was supposed to be safe ground. Instead, it exposed them more brutally than any royal snub could. And here's where it gets darker. The crowd's jeers weren't just about Meghan and Harry. They were about what they represent. A brand built on victimhood, a lifestyle funded by lucrative deals, a narrative many feel is hypocritical. In a room full of first responders, the real heroes, the Sussexes looked out of place, out of touch, and the boos reminded them of it. Have you ever been caught off guard by rejection? That sinking feeling when you realize the crowd is against you? Now amplify that by 1,000, with cameras rolling and the world watching. That's the setup Meghan and Harry found themselves in. A stage they didn't control, a moment they couldn't spin, and it wasn't going to stop there. Because once the boos began, they didn't end. They grew. They twisted into hackles, into cutting words shouted from across the crowd. Every jeer was another crack in the fragile shield Meghan tried to hold up. Every shout was another reminder that the narrative wasn't hers to dictate anymore. And as the night went on, the voices grew bolder. The hecklers sharpened their words. What they said, how they said it, and the reaction it triggered would escalate this from an awkward moment into a public humiliation of historic proportions. But that part of the story, that's still to come. Because what Meghan and Harry faced next wasn't just booing. It was direct, pointed, and vicious. And it was about to change everything. What happens when a moment of discomfort doesn't fade, but instead escalates into a tidal wave of humiliation? That's what Meghan Markle and Prince Harry discovered at 1805 Live. The boos weren't a fleeting sound that could be brushed aside with a polite smile. They were the opening act of something much darker. They were only the beginning. Imagine this with me for a second. You walk into a venue, dressed for the occasion, confident that your presence will light up the crowd. You've been told that you are expected, admired, perhaps even revered. But instead of applause, the sound that greets you is cold, sharp, and biting. Boos. Unrelenting and unmistakable. Now add the cameras. Add the flashing lights of paparazzi ready to capture not just your arrival, but your reaction. Add the whispers of VIPs in the audience, celebrities turning their heads, wondering if they just heard what they think they heard. Can you feel the heat rising in your chest? The sinking feeling in your stomach? That's exactly what Meghan and Harry felt in those first terrifying seconds when the boos began. At first, Meghan tried to ignore it. She kept her chin high, her smile frozen. Harry gave that awkward, stiff wave he uses when things feel uncomfortable. They thought, perhaps, the boos would fade. Perhaps it was just a few rogue voices. But the thing about public rejection is that it emboldens others. When the first person booed and no one stopped them, the next joined in. And then another. Soon, the ripple became a wave. Let me ask you, have you ever seen a crowd turn? It doesn't happen quietly. It happens like fire, spreading faster than anyone can control. and the sound, once unleashed, takes on a power of its own. That night, at 1805 Live, Meghan and Harry didn't just hear boos. They felt the collective weight of a crowd that no longer wanted to play along with the fairy tale. And here's the irony. Harry has faced boos before, outside the palace gates, at royal events where public disapproval cut through the pomp. Meghan, too, has read the vicious headlines. But this was different. This wasn't tabloid ink on a page. This wasn't Twitter trolls hiding behind screens. This was live, unedited. A crowd shouting their discontent to their faces. So what exactly were they booing? Was it resentment for the way the couple abandoned their royal duties while clinging to royal titles? Was it anger at their multi-million-dollar deals while ordinary people struggled with real-life challenges? Or was it simply fatigue, an exhaustion with the endless cycle of complaints, interviews, and victimhood narratives? It's a question worth asking. And the answer may be all of the above. One woman in the crowd, her voice cutting through like a knife, shouted something sharp enough to make those near her gasp. A man followed, his jeer more mocking than angry. Each voice added to the chorus. And suddenly, Meghan and Harry weren't simply walking into an event. They were walking into a wall of public rejection. Harry's reaction was telling. His jaw clenched. His body stiffened. He pulled Meghan closer, almost shielding her. But even that protective gesture was revealing. Because shielding her meant admitting there was something to shield her from. The cameras caught it. The crowd saw it. And the humiliation deepened. Meghan's mask slipped for just a second. Her eyes flicked toward the source of the noise. Her lips tightened. The smile faltered. And in that moment, the audience knew. They had pierced her armor. The very woman who built her reputation on poise and control couldn't hide the sting. And isn't that what the hecklers wanted? To strip away the performance, to reveal the vulnerability beneath? In that instant, Meghan was no longer the duchess, the actress, or the polished humanitarian. She was simply a woman being booed. But here's the twist. It wasn't just the sound that made the moment devastating. It was the silence around it. Where were the defenders? Where were the cheers to drown out the negativity? Absent. Minimal. Scattered. The lack of support spoke louder than the jeers themselves. Because nothing screams isolation more than a crowd that chooses not to rescue you. And that silence was deafening. The Sussexes have always thrived on the illusion of popularity. Remember the Netflix trailers, spliced with screaming fans, making it look like they were adored worldwide? Remember the carefully staged appearances, designed to amplify their image as beloved figures? That night at 1805 Live, the illusion cracked. The boos shattered it. And the lack of counter-cheers confirmed it. The tide had turned. Can you picture the organizers in that moment? The PR staff gripping their clipboards, exchanging frantic glances. The security team stiffening, waiting for signs of escalation. The event hosts whispering in disbelief. Because what was supposed to be a shining highlight of the evening had turned into a PR disaster. And it wasn't over. Because boos, as humiliating as they are, can still be brushed off. You can smile, laugh, say you didn't hear them. But what came next, the heckling, was impossible to ignore. Direct words, sharp barbs, and public humiliation at a level Meghan and Harry had never experienced live. They had walked into a lion's den without realizing it. And the lions were ready to roar. Have you ever been in a room where one voice rises above the crowd, so sharp and so cutting that it slices through every layer of composure? That's exactly what happened the moment the heckling began at 1805 Live. The boos were humiliating enough, but boos are faceless. They are a chorus, a background noise. Heckling, on the other hand, is personal. It's direct. It's a weaponized voice aimed straight at its target. And that night, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry were the bullseye. Picture it. Meghan and Harry are still making their way through the venue, their smiles stiff, their bodies tense, their every movement magnified by the weight of expectation. The boos hang in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. And then, clear as a bell, someone shouts. Not just noise, not just jeering. Words, cutting words. Go back to the palace. The line ripped through the crowd, echoing above the music. It wasn't whispered. It wasn't polite. It was shouted with a venom that made even those around the heckler wince. And here's the thing about heckling. It gives permission. One voice emboldens another. Within seconds, others joined in. Stop playing the victims. No one wants you here. Frauds. Each line, each insult, landed like a blow. Meghan's head tilted slightly, her lips pressing into a thin line. Harry's eyes darted toward the crowd, his protective instinct in overdrive, but powerless in the face of what was happening. This wasn't a heckler hidden behind a screen. This was live, inescapable, public. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to have your carefully crafted image dismantled in real time? Meghan, the master of narrative, the woman who orchestrated Netflix documentaries and Oprah sit-downs, was suddenly stripped of control. There was no script, no interviewer to steer, no editing team to cut the unflattering angles. Just voices. Unfiltered, cruel, and devastatingly effective. Harry, too, wasn't spared. If anything, the crowd seemed even harsher toward him. One man shouted, "What would your mother think?" A line so brutal it cut through the night like lightning. It was a reminder of Diana, the beloved figure Harry so often invokes, now weaponized against him in public. The cameras caught the flicker in his eyes, that flash of pain he couldn't hide. And the crowd knew it. They had landed their blow. Isn't it astonishing? These two once represented hope, change, and glamour. They were global icons, symbols of rebellion against the stiff traditions of the monarchy. And now, in front of a crowd meant to admire them, they were mocked like fading celebrities past their prime. And here's the cruel irony. The event itself was about heroes. Real heroes. Firefighters. Police officers. Paramedics. People who risk their lives for strangers every single day. Standing beside them, Meghan and Harry looked out of place. And the hecklers knew it. "These are the real heroes, not you," one voice shouted, drawing a wave of applause that contrasted sharply with the boos Meghan and Harry endured. The message was clear. Their star power couldn't compete with genuine sacrifice. Now let's pause here. Because this moment wasn't just about noise. It was about symbolism. Heckling is theater. It turns an audience into a participant. And that night, the hecklers weren't just shouting, they were shaping the story. Every insult was a headline in the making. Every jeer was a dagger aimed not at their ears, but at their legacy. Meghan tried to move faster, her posture stiff but betraying urgency. Harry leaned in closer, whispering something we'll never hear, but can only imagine. Reassurance? Or maybe just the frantic plea to keep moving, to get through it. But the hecklers followed them with their voices, relentless. Each step was another opportunity for humiliation. And doesn't it make you wonder, what was going through Meghan's mind in that moment? Did she think back to the days of royal tours, when crowds screamed with excitement at her mere presence? Did she long for the safety of controlled palace events, where hecklers would be silenced before they could utter a word? Or did she realize, in that moment, that her reinvention in America was slipping through her fingers? Because this wasn't Britain. This wasn't the tabloids. This was her home turf. And yet, the rejection was louder here than anywhere else. Harry, too, must have felt the sting of irony. He left the royal family to protect Meghan, to shield her from the cruelty of the British press. But now, here in California, in the land they thought would embrace them, they faced something even worse, the raw voices of the public. Not headlines, not gossip, people, shouting their discontent, their anger, their mockery. The organizers, backstage, must have felt the chaos rippling through the night. The Sussexes were supposed to be the highlight, the glamour injection. Instead, they had become the story, for all the wrong reasons. Staff whispered, celebrities exchanged knowing looks, and the air grew thicker with tension. And here's where it gets even more devastating. Heckling doesn't just humiliate in the moment. It lingers. The words echo in your mind long after the night is over. Frauds. Go home. No one wants you here. These weren't just insults. They were verdicts. Public verdicts that Meghan and Harry could not erase. So what do you do when the heckling becomes unbearable? You leave. You walk out. But even that decision, even that desperate attempt to reclaim dignity, carries consequences. Because Meghan's walkout wasn't just an exit. It was a surrender. And that surrender was about to be seen by everyone. She tried to hold it together. Every inch of her posture, every flicker of her expression screamed one thing: composure. But the human face betrays truths the heart cannot hide. Meghan Markle, who has mastered the art of curated appearances, of polished smiles and poised gestures, could not fully mask what she was feeling in that moment. And what she was feeling was raw discomfort. Have you ever tried to smile while your heart pounds with humiliation? It's a strange performance. Your lips curve upward, but your eyes betray the storm beneath. That's exactly what Meghan showed as the boos and heckles rained down at 1805 Live. For the first time in a long time, the mask cracked. Look closely at the footage, at the photographs snapped by merciless cameras. Her smile was tight, forced, almost plastic. The kind of smile you give when you're trying desperately not to cry, not to let anyone see they've gotten to you. Her eyes, though, those told a different story. A flicker of panic, of disbelief. She had expected glamour. She had expected applause. She was met with rejection. Harry felt it too. His body leaned into hers, protective, as if by sheer force he could shield her from the sound. But that gesture only amplified the vulnerability, because it told the world, yes, something is wrong. They're not okay. And the crowd knew it. Isn't it ironic? Meghan has long been praised for her ability to control her image. The Oprah interview, the Netflix series, the carefully staged photo ops in Montecito. Every detail, her wardrobe, her tone, her expressions, calibrated for effect. But in the chaos of that moment, there was no producer, no director, no editor to rescue her. Just her face, her body, her reaction. And those images, unfiltered, will live forever. Think about the contradiction. On one hand, Meghan has painted herself as strong, unshakable, even defiant against critics and tabloids. On the other, here she was, frozen, rattled, visibly uncomfortable. And the audience saw it. The hecklers fed on it. Because nothing fuels mockery more than knowing your target feels it deeply. At one point, Meghan's hand tightened on Harry's arm. Not a gentle touch, but a grip. Firm, almost desperate. As if to say, keep moving. Get me out of here. Have you ever clutched someone like that? Not in romance, but in fear? That was Meghan in that moment. And Harry, oh Harry, his jaw clenched. His lips pursed. He tried to keep walking with that royal stride, the stiff wave. But he couldn't hide the flash of anger in his eyes. Anger at the crowd, at the situation, maybe even at himself for leading Meghan into this disaster. Because the truth is, his discomfort was written across his face too. The cameras zoomed in. And here's the brutal reality. One uncomfortable glance lasts only a second in real life. But frozen in a photograph, it becomes eternal. Headlines would dissect those images. Body language experts would analyze the tight smiles, the awkward whispers, the visible strain. And Meghan's discomfort, captured forever, would become the story. Now, let's dig deeper. Why does this matter? Because public figures thrive, or crumble, on perception. A smile can sell a fairy tale. A flicker of discomfort can unravel it. Meghan and Harry's entire brand is built on their ability to control the narrative. But in that venue, surrounded by boos and heckles, they lost control. Completely. And here's the kicker. Meghan's discomfort wasn't just personal, it was symbolic. It showed that the couple who once positioned themselves as untouchable, above the noise, were in fact vulnerable to it. Human. Affected. And isn't that the ultimate irony? In fleeing the royal family to protect themselves, they exposed themselves to an even harsher spotlight, one they couldn't dim. Audience, let me ask you, if you were Meghan in that moment, what would you have done? Would you have stood tall, defiantly smiling no matter what? Or would you have done exactly what she did? Grip your husband's arm, quicken your pace, and silently beg for the night to end? Because end it she did. The discomfort built, second by second, until it became unbearable. She could no longer pretend, no longer smile, no longer endure. And then, the decision was made. She would walk out. But this wasn't just an exit. It was a signal. To the audience. To the cameras. To the world. Meghan's discomfort had turned into retreat. And that retreat would ignite a firestorm. She couldn't take it anymore. The boos, the jeers, the cutting heckles, it was all too much. Meghan Markle, the woman who once dazzled on royal tours and commanded global attention, did what no celebrity ever wants to do in front of cameras. She walked out. But let's not mistake this for a graceful exit. This wasn't the dignified kind of departure where one quietly slips away, unnoticed. No, this was abrupt, jarring, impossible to hide. Every camera caught it, every phone recorded it, every eye in the venue followed her as she turned on her heel and left. And that, perhaps, was the most humiliating part. Have you ever tried to leave a room when you know all eyes are on you? Your body betrays you. You walk faster than you should, your shoulders tighten, your face burns. That's what Meghan showed that night. Her stride quickened, her chin tilted slightly higher, defiance mixed with desperation. Harry followed, his steps heavy, his expression grim. He wasn't leading her out. He was trailing her. And that, symbolically, spoke volumes. This wasn't Harry's walkout. This was Meghan's. She set the pace. She made the choice. And Harry, the once prince who left his family for her, had no choice but to follow. But why was this walkout so shocking? Because for Meghan, every appearance is calculated. Every move is scripted. Her brand depends on control. And here she was, storming out in full view, abandoning the very event she came to support. It wasn't just a retreat, it was a collapse. Think about the setting. A charity concert for first responders. A cause meant to inspire solidarity and admiration. And the Duchess of Sussex walked out, visibly rattled, leaving whispers in her wake. Can you imagine the organizers' horror? The very guest meant to elevate the event had just turned it into a spectacle. Let's pause and reflect. Meghan has always been portrayed as strong, unshakable, a woman who takes on her critics with poise. But walking out? That's not poise. That's surrender. That's waving the white flag in front of an audience who wanted nothing more than to see her flinch. And flinch she did. Harry's presence only made the scene more tragic. His body language screamed frustration, shoulders tense, lips tight, eyes darting. At one point, he gestured as if trying to slow Meghan down, but she didn't stop. She was done. And Harry, powerless, had to fall in line. Ask yourself this. When have you ever seen a royal walk out of a public event like this? Royals endure. Royals smile through scandal, through protests, through whispers. Meghan's decision to leave wasn't just a personal choice. It was a rejection of royal tradition. And in rejecting it, she revealed exactly what her critics have always accused her of: weakness under pressure. But here's the cruel irony. Meghan thought walking out would end the humiliation, that by leaving, she could escape the boos and heckles. But the opposite happened. By walking out, she magnified it. The cameras didn't cut away. They followed. The headlines didn't ignore it. They exploded. Meghan storms out. Sussex is booed. Charity event overshadowed by royal drama. The very act meant to end the nightmare became the defining image of the night. And doesn't it strike you as symbolic? Meghan walked out of the royal family, too. She left behind duty, tradition, and structure because she claimed it was unbearable. And now, at 1805 Live, she walked out again, this time from the public itself. The pattern is undeniable. When things get hard, Meghan leaves. And each time, she leaves a trail of chaos behind her. But the walkout wasn't just about Meghan. It was about the crowd. Because what do you think happened when she left? The boos didn't fade, they grew. The jeers didn't soften, they sharpened. Some laughed, others clapped mockingly. The crowd knew they had won. They had broken the Duchess. They had forced her to retreat. And for hecklers, that's the ultimate victory. Harry's role in all of this cannot be overlooked. For a man who once fought wars, who once stood shoulder to shoulder with veterans, who once vowed to protect his wife from the cruelties of public life, this was a defeat. He couldn't shield her. He couldn't silence the crowd. He couldn't salvage the moment. Instead, he walked out behind her, his once proud image diminished to a supporting role in her humiliation. Now let's step into the minds of the people left behind. The organizers, the staff, the celebrities in the VIP section. Whispers spread like wildfire. Did she just leave? Was that a walkout? Unbelievable. The concert, meant to celebrate heroes, had been hijacked by Meghan's exit. And in Hollywood, where reputation is everything, that kind of scene doesn't just vanish. It lingers, staining the brand forever. Because here's the truth. A walkout isn't just about leaving. It's about what you leave behind. And Meghan left behind a crowd buzzing with disbelief, cameras buzzing with footage, and a media machine hungry for scandal. So the question becomes, was this a moment of self-preservation, or was it a catastrophic mistake? Did Meghan save herself from further humiliation, or did she guarantee it would follow her forever? One thing is certain, the walkout was not the end of the story. It was the spark that lit the fuse. Because behind the scenes, as Meghan and Harry vanished into the night, the real storm was only just beginning. And what was said backstage, what celebrities whispered, what organizers fumed, what insiders leaked, would prove far more brutal than anything shouted from the crowd. The silence that followed Meghan and Harry's exit wasn't silence at all. It was something more dangerous, an atmosphere charged with disbelief, awkward laughter, and murmurs that spread through the crowd like sparks leaping from a fire. People weren't just watching a concert anymore. They were watching history being made. A royal walkout, a public humiliation, a spectacle no one had expected but no one could look away from. Have you ever been in a room where something shocking happens, and suddenly everyone is whispering, exchanging glances, reacting in real time? That's exactly what swept through 1805 Live the moment Meghan disappeared from view. The boos and heckles were one thing, but the walkout, that was seismic. The cameras caught the crowd's faces. Some people laughed outright, shaking their heads as if they couldn't believe what they'd just seen. Others looked embarrassed, almost cringing on Meghan's behalf, like secondhand humiliation. And then there were those who clapped, not in support, but in mockery. The kind of slow, sarcastic applause meant to wound deeper than any shout. And here's the irony. In leaving, Meghan thought she was ending the humiliation. Instead, she amplified it. Because the moment she walked out, the narrative was no longer about boos or heckles. It was about surrender, about admitting defeat, and the crowd could feel it. Now imagine the ripple effect among the VIPs, the celebrities sprinkled throughout the audience. Some of them smirked, exchanging knowing looks. Others whispered to their companions, their faces lit with that unmistakable expression of people witnessing a scandal unfold live. Think about it. Hollywood stars, executives, influencers, all watching Meghan Markle, the self-styled Hollywood Duchess, crumble in front of them. Doesn't that image alone feel devastating? The organizers, meanwhile, scrambled. Backstage, staff members were panicking. Meghan and Harry's presence had been a centerpiece of the night. Their star power meant to boost the event's profile. But now, the story of the night was no longer the charity, no longer the music. It was Meghan's exit. A PR nightmare unfolding in real time. You can almost picture the frantic phone calls, the whispered damage control plans, the realization that no press release could undo what had just happened. And let's not forget the performers. On stage, some of them caught the commotion, their eyes flicking toward the movement in the crowd as Meghan walked out. For a performer, nothing is more distracting than drama in the audience. And this wasn't just drama. It was a headline unraveling itself in front of them. But what about the average concertgoers? The people who had come for a night of music, not royal scandal? For them, this became the story they would tell for years. I was there the night Meghan Markle got booed and walked out. It transformed a charity event into folklore, a piece of cultural gossip that would outlive the music. And isn't that the cruelest twist? Meghan and Harry had come to be seen, to be celebrated, to reclaim a bit of their glamour. Instead, they gave the audience a story, a scandal, that overshadowed everything else. The emotional whiplash of the crowd was almost palpable. Some were gleeful, feeding on the downfall. Others were shocked, even sympathetic. But everyone, without exception, was talking about it. In the age of social media, that kind of instant buzz spreads faster than wildfire. Phones came out, videos were uploaded, captions were typed with shaking fingers. Within minutes, the internet was alive with footage and commentary. And here's where the humiliation deepens. Because boos and heckles sting in the moment, but social media ensures they never die. Clips of Meghan walking out, Harry's clenched jaw, the crowd's reaction. They were instantly immortalized, replayed endlessly, dissected frame by frame. For Meghan, the humiliation didn't end when she walked out. It multiplied. Think about the symbolism of that crowd reaction. Meghan once walked into rooms that erupted in applause. She was once the center of admiration, hailed as the modernizer of the monarchy. Now, in California of all places, the land she claimed as her sanctuary, she walked into jeers and left in disgrace. The transformation is staggering. And let's not underestimate the power of celebrity gossip networks. The whispers among the VIPs that night weren't just idle chatter. They would spill out later, into dinner parties, into industry meetings, into back-channel conversations. Hollywood thrives on reputation, and reputation spreads in whispers. That night, Meghan's reputation took a hit that no PR strategy could fully repair. So ask yourself this, what hurts more? The boos of strangers? Or the whispers of peers, the laughter of fellow celebrities, the smirks of industry insiders, the knowledge that people you wanted to impress are now mocking you behind closed doors? Because Meghan didn't just walk out of a concert. She walked straight into a storm of gossip and ridicule that would haunt her far longer than the sound of those boos. And the worst part? The humiliation wasn't confined to the crowd. Behind the scenes, in the backstage corridors and private lounges, the whispers were sharper, the judgments harsher, and the fallout far more damaging than anything the public could see. Because what was said backstage, away from the cameras, would turn this embarrassment into a scandal with teeth. And that, Meghan was not prepared for. Backstage at 1805 Live, the real carnage began. Out in the crowd, Meghan and Harry had endured the boos and heckles. The walkout had turned them into a public spectacle. But behind the velvet ropes, away from the flashing lights, the whispers grew sharper, the judgments colder, and the backlash more devastating. Have you ever been in a room where everyone is smiling politely, but you can feel the undercurrent of scorn? That's the environment Meghan and Harry walked away from the jeering crowd into. The backstage corridors and green rooms were filled with celebrities, organizers, sponsors, and staff. And instead of sympathy, there was shock, amusement, and, in some cases, outright ridicule. Picture it. Event organizers with clipboards and headsets exchanging frantic looks. This was supposed to be a seamless night celebrating first responders. The Sussexes had been billed as star attractions, a headline presence. Their attendance had been teased to donors, whispered about in PR materials, sold as a highlight. And instead, they became the scandal, the showstopper for all the wrong reasons. One insider reportedly muttered under their breath, "This is a disaster." Another was heard saying, "We'll never live this down." The donors weren't talking about the charity anymore. They were buzzing about Meghan's face, Harry's jaw, the walkout. And in Hollywood, where reputations rise and fall on whispers, that was fatal. Now let's talk about the celebrities. You'd expect them to be empathetic, right? After all, who hasn't faced a rough crowd? But here's the truth. Hollywood is brutal. It thrives on schadenfreude, on the downfall of those who once positioned themselves as untouchable. Some stars laughed. Others smirked. A few even rolled their eyes, as if to say, "We saw this coming." One performer, overhearing the commotion, was rumored to have said, "They wanted the spotlight. They got it." Cruel, yes, but devastatingly accurate. Because that night, Meghan and Harry's craving for relevance backfired spectacularly. And the organizers? They were livid. Imagine working for months to stage a flawless event, only for two guests to hijack the headlines. Sponsors who had written big checks for good press suddenly worried they'd be associated with scandal instead. Publicists were already on their phones, drafting statements, calculating damage control. Some even questioned if inviting Meghan and Harry had been a mistake from the start. But here's the deeper sting. Hollywood insiders trade reputations like currency. Meghan and Harry were already on shaky ground. The Spotify deal collapsed. Netflix was cooling off. Invitations to elite circles had become fewer, more selective. And now this, an embarrassment that spread instantly across social media. Instead of regaining relevance, they had lost it further. Instead of winning hearts, they'd hardened perceptions. Can you imagine Meghan's state of mind in those backstage moments? Was she furious at the crowd? Or was she furious at Harry for not preventing it? Did she curse the organizers for not controlling the audience? Or did she, deep down, realize that the public sentiment against her had become too powerful to spin away? Harry's mood was darker. Witnesses described him as tense, muttering under his breath, pacing. He looked angry, not just at the hecklers, but at the humiliation itself. For a man who once commanded respect as a royal, as a soldier, as a son of Diana, this was intolerable. Yet he could do nothing. And here's where the behind-the-scenes backlash turns deadly, because it didn't stay behind the scenes. Whispers leaked. Staffers talked. Celebrities gossiped. Within hours, journalists had their inside sources. Headlines weren't just about the booze anymore. They were about what insiders said backstage. The laughter, the disdain, the sense that Meghan and Harry had crossed a line from controversial to embarrassing. Think about that for a second. Public rejection is bad enough. But private rejection, when your peers, the people you're trying to impress, mock you behind closed doors, that's fatal in Hollywood. Because once the industry decides you're a liability, the doors close quickly. And Meghan and Harry, already on thin ice, felt those doors slamming shut. And let's not forget the symbolism. Meghan and Harry left the royal family claiming they wanted to build a new life in America, a life where they'd be free, respected, and adored. Yet here they were, in their supposed safe haven, being rejected not just by the public, but by the very industry they hoped to dominate. So ask yourself this: what's worse, being booed by strangers or being ridiculed by the people whose approval you crave? For Meghan and Harry, the answer was both. They got both that night. And it marked a turning point. Because the backlash from 1805 Live wasn't just a bad evening. It was a death knell for their Hollywood ambitions. And the proof? Within days, power players in the industry were already whispering about distancing themselves. Deals in progress were reevaluated. Invitations quietly withdrawn. The couple's names, once thought to guarantee attention, now guaranteed controversy. But the most brutal twist? Meghan thought she could spin it. She believed she could rewrite the story. Yet the media was already circling, hungry for blood. And the headlines that came next would make the boos sound like applause. In Hollywood, perception is everything. A single night can make or break a reputation. For Meghan and Harry, the fallout from 1805 Live was more than a bad headline. It was the loudest alarm bell, yet that their Hollywood dream was crumbling. Think about it. This wasn't the first time their star power had been questioned. Spotify had already pulled the plug, with that infamous executive mocking them as grifters. Netflix, once eager to capitalize on their story, had started cooling off, cutting deals short, leaving projects in limbo. And then came the 1805 debacle, proof, in front of celebrities, donors, and cameras, that the Sussex brand was no longer a draw but a liability. Have you ever noticed how fast Hollywood turns? One week you're hot, the next week you're untouchable. That's exactly what Meghan and Harry experienced. The morning after their walkout, the phones were buzzing, but not with invitations. Publicists, agents, and studio executives whispered the same refrain. Do we really want to be associated with them anymore? And here's the painful truth. Hollywood loves a comeback, but it despises desperation. Meghan and Harry had built their brand on victimhood and revelations. But at 1805 Live, they weren't victims, they were outcasts. And the industry saw it. Insiders reported that some of the biggest names in attendance that night mocked the walkout privately. One actor allegedly said, "They thought they were the stars, but the crowd made them extras." Another was overheard laughing. "If they can't handle booze, they don't belong here." Cruel? Yes, but that's Hollywood. The Sussexes weren't judged on their charity work or even their titles. They were judged on their ability to command a room. And that night, they failed spectacularly. Now let's connect the dots. The boos weren't just about one concert. They were about a larger fatigue. Audiences had grown tired of the endless complaints, the carefully packaged grievances, the expensive deals with little payoff. The Sussexes were supposed to be glamorous outsiders, rewriting the script. Instead, they had become a parody of themselves. And Hollywood, ruthless as ever, began distancing itself. Take Netflix, for example. Their docuseries had been a splashy start, but it didn't have staying power. Viewers tuned in for the gossip, but by the end, critics slammed it as repetitive, whiny, and overproduced. After 1805 Live, executives must have wondered, if audiences boo them in person, why would they tune in for more? Or consider their other projects, the children's book, the podcasts, the charity appearances. Each one framed as the next chapter, but none living up to the hype. Hollywood thrives on momentum, and Meghan and Harry's momentum had stalled. The concert humiliation didn't just stall it, it shoved it off the cliff. And here's the deeper irony. Meghan once dreamed of conquering Hollywood. Long before Harry, she saw herself as a star in waiting. Suits gave her a taste, but marrying a prince seemed to promise the ultimate stage. Yet at 1805 Live, the very industry she longed to dominate laughed, jeered, and whispered about her downfall. Harry, too, felt the sting. He was never meant to be a Hollywood figure. His identity was tied to the military, to duty, to royalty. In America, Meghan tried to make him into a celebrity, a brand. But that night exposed the truth. Without the crown, without the uniform, without the palace, Harry was just another man being booed at a concert. Ask yourself, what's more brutal than rejection? Rejection on your home turf. Meghan had left Britain claiming she'd find freedom in America, that she'd be embraced for who she really was. Instead, California, her California, turned against her. And Hollywood, the land of reinvention, slammed its doors. And the media? They smelled blood. Headlines the next morning were merciless. Booed out of California. From royalty to ridicule. Meghan's walkout disaster. Even outlets that had once been sympathetic couldn't resist the spectacle. Clips went viral. Memes spread. And in the world of Hollywood, where brand is everything, this was catastrophic. But here's the chilling part. Meghan thought she could still spin it. She believed she could twist the narrative, cast herself as the wronged party yet again. And her team worked overtime, planting sympathetic stories, deflecting blame onto the crowd, the organizers, even the media. But it didn't work. Because the footage spoke louder than words. The boos were real. The heckles were clear. The walkout was undeniable. And Hollywood doesn't forgive humiliation caught on camera. So what happens when the industry you pinned your future on starts to walk away? Deals evaporate. Invitations vanish. Meetings get postponed indefinitely. That's what Meghan and Harry faced in the weeks after 1805 Live. The humiliation didn't fade. It metastasized, infecting every corner of their reputation. And here's the question that haunts them. If Hollywood no longer wants them, where do they go? They burned bridges with the palace. They alienated the British public. And now, even California crowds boo them. What's left? Because after 1805 Live, it wasn't just about boos. It was about the end of an era, the end of Meghan and Harry as Hollywood's golden couple. And the next wave of the storm, the media frenzy that followed, would prove it beyond doubt. The morning after 1805 Live, the story wasn't the performers, the venue, or even the charity it was supposed to honor. It was Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, and the humiliating spectacle of their public rejection. By sunrise, the media frenzy was already in full swing, and once that machine starts, there's no stopping it. Headlines screamed across tabloids and broadsheets alike. Booed out of California. Meghan storms out in disgrace. From royalty to ridicule. Sussex is heckled at charity concert. Every outlet, from gossip blogs to mainstream news, had seized on the same narrative. And for Meghan and Harry, it was a nightmare. Have you noticed how the media works when it smells blood? It doesn't just report, it multiplies. One clip becomes 10. One photo becomes a slideshow. One eyewitness account becomes a dozen. Suddenly, the humiliation of the boos and the walkout was everywhere. Social media was flooded with shaky videos from phones, each capturing the jeers, the heckles, the walkout from different angles. Some zoomed in on Meghan's face, catching the fleeting flicker of discomfort she couldn't hide. Others focused on Harry's clenched jaw, his stiff wave. Others still showed the crowd itself, laughing, shouting, clapping sarcastically. Each clip became evidence. And together, they built an undeniable case. Meghan and Harry had been publicly rejected. The hashtags trended instantly. Hashtag booed again. Hashtag walkout. Hashtag Montecito exiles. Memes appeared within hours, side-by-side images of Meghan waving at her wedding compared with Meghan grimacing at the concert. Captions like, from cheers to jeers. Cruel? Absolutely. But in the digital age, cruelty is currency, and Meghan and Harry were the trending topic of the day. Even outlets once sympathetic to them struggled to soften the blow. Where once they would have emphasized unfair treatment or jealous critics, this time the footage was too clear, too raw, too undeniable. The spin couldn't erase what millions had seen with their own eyes. And so even sympathetic headlines carried a sting. Sussex's face hostile reception in California. And then came the analysis. Pundits on TV debated what the boos meant. Is America finally turning on Meghan and Harry? One asked. Another commentator, smirking, replied, if even California is booing, where do they have left to go? Royal experts weighed in, gleeful at the symbolism. The British public has long rejected them, one declared, but now America is catching up. Can you imagine Meghan watching those clips, hearing those debates? She once controlled the narrative, sitting with Oprah, dropping bombshells on Netflix, curating her image with carefully crafted interviews. Now, she was the subject of ridicule, her discomfort replayed endlessly, her walkout dissected frame by frame. And Harry? The media cut him no slack. He was mocked for following Meghan out like a shadow, for failing to stand tall, for looking powerless. Some headlines even framed it as Meghan dragging Harry out, reducing the once proud prince to a supporting act in her humiliation. For a man already struggling with his identity outside the monarchy, this was salt in the wound. But here's the devastating twist. The palace didn't need to say a word. The silence from Buckingham Palace was deafening and damning. Every headline about the boos and heckles was contrasted with the quiet dignity of Charles, William, Kate, and in carrying out their duties. The comparison was brutal. Royals enduring cheers and respect on one side. Meghan and Harry enduring boos and walkouts on the other. The international press joined in. In Britain, the tabloids had a field day. In Europe, the story was framed as proof of their declining global relevance. Even in the US, outlets that once treated them as darlings ran pieces dripping with irony. One headline summed it up perfectly: from Hollywood to heckled, the Sussex fall from grace. And doesn't it feel ironic? Meghan and Harry had left the UK claiming the British press was too cruel, too invasive, too relentless. But now, the very thing they fled had followed them across the Atlantic. The same tabloids they tried to escape splashed their humiliation across front pages. Only this time, they weren't twisting the truth. They didn't need to. The footage spoke for itself. The frenzy didn't stop at headlines. Talk shows mocked them, comedians cracked jokes, late-night hosts pounced on the material. One quipped, "Meghan wanted Hollywood applause. Turns out she got Rotten Tomatoes instead." Audiences laughed, the kind of laughter that stings deeper than any jeer. And here's where the frenzy turned poisonous. Once the media piles on, everyone wants a piece. Old critics resurfaced. Former friends and aides whispered to reporters. Anonymous sources close to the couple gave scathing accounts of Meghan's backstage fury, Harry's sulking, the staff's panic. True or not, it didn't matter. The narrative was set. Ask yourself, when have you ever seen the media united across tabloids, gossip blogs, and mainstream outlets? It happens rarely, and only when the story is undeniable. Meghan and Harry's humiliation at 1805 Live was undeniable. And that's the tragedy of it. They left the UK claiming they wanted to tell their own story. But after this night, they lost control of it completely. Because if boos and heckles were the spark, the media frenzy was the wildfire. And the wildfire didn't just burn their image in California. It spread all the way back to Buckingham Palace, where silent observers couldn't help but notice the flames. Silence can be louder than words. And when it comes to the British royal family, silence is strategy. After Meghan and Harry's humiliating night at 1805 Live, as headlines blared and social media feasted on the boos, Buckingham Palace issued no statement, no rebuttal, no defense. Nothing. And yet, that silence spoke volumes. Have you ever had an enemy who doesn't even bother to fight back because your own actions are doing the work for them? That's exactly what Meghan and Harry faced. Their critics inside the monarchy didn't need to lift a finger. The footage, the walkout, the global headlines, they were victory enough. Inside palace walls, can't you just imagine the quiet satisfaction? King Charles, who had long endured his younger son's attacks in interviews and memoirs, now saw the tide turning without lifting a single royal hand. Prince William, who bore the brunt of Harry's accusations and spare, could watch in silence as the brother who painted him as cold and cruel was publicly ridiculed half a world away. Princess Anne, the stoic and pragmatic royal, would have likely raised an eyebrow, perhaps with that knowing look that said, "We warned you this would happen." Because here's the truth, the monarchy thrives on endurance. Royals face protests, discontent, even jeers. But they stand their ground. They wave. They smile. They embody the crown's resilience. Meghan and Harry's walkout, by contrast, showed fragility. And in doing so, it vindicated every critic who ever claimed they weren't cut out for royal life. Isn't that ironic? Meghan once accused the family of being cold, unfeeling, trapped by protocol. Yet it was that very protocol, the stiff upper lip, the refusal to flinch, that made the Windsors seem stronger as the Sussexes crumbled. The contrast was brutal. The British press wasted no time drawing those comparisons. Photos of Charles at official events, smiling calmly, were placed side by side with Meghan storming out of the California concert. William shaking hands with crowds juxtaposed against Harry grimacing under boos. The message was clear: one family endures, the other retreats. And it wasn't just the press. Public opinion shifted further. Polls in the UK had already shown Harry and Meghan sinking in popularity. But after 1805 Live, Even American commentators began suggesting the couple had overplayed their hand. Imagine the royal courtiers reading those headlines, exchanging quiet nods of vindication. But here's the question. Did the royal family feel pity, or did they feel vindication? Some insiders believe Charles, despite the tension, still harbors affection for his son and may have winced at Harry's humiliation. Others argue the palace saw it as poetic justice, karma, perhaps, for years of attacks and accusations. Either way, they stayed silent. And in silence, they won. Remember, the monarchy doesn't compete in the short game. It plays the long game. Meghan and Harry wanted immediate relevance, documentaries, interviews, headlines. The royals? They wait. They endure. And every time the Sussexes stumble, that endurance looks stronger. Harry, especially, must have felt the sting of this contrast. He once stood on palace balconies to thunderous applause. Now he was booed in California while his brother, the heir, was cheered at royal events.